typically, if you're not going to sleep, if you're going to sleep late, you will not release human growth hormone, as you'll get less of a bolus of release. That's when all the physical restoration happens. So all the regeneration physically. So if we're bypassing that, we're basically all the work that we did in the gym or everything that we did during the day, we're just not going to recover from that in the same way that we would if we were getting that sleep. There's no question there are going to be times in your life where you're literally a shift worker because you're caring for a sick parent or a sick child, or you just literally have kids and they're young. You're a shift worker. I mean, there are things, you're making decisions to go out and socialize in times that maybe aren't optimal for kind of human functioning. There's no question that there are periods in your life where it's going to be harder. That said, there are some things that you can do to mitigate some of the negative effects of both duration and timing. And one of those things is dialing in your feeding window, which is another kind of circadian behavior. So the timing of when you eat is pretty important, and can at least check some of the boxes in terms of its impact on metabolic functioning and heart health and things like that. So it's really about the timing of when you're eating your food in relation to the light-dark cycle. And there's been a lot of interesting studies that have been done that show if you eat, within, kind of 8 to 12 hour window, you will have much better metabolic outcomes. And if we see in the WHOOP data that if you stop eating 3 hours prior to when you sleep, to when you fall asleep, markers of sleep and recovery are exponentially better. So timing of meals really does matter. And there's no question that, and we know this from other research, you're more primed to metabolize food closer to when you wake up in the morning. So earlier in the day, you're going to be much more primed to utilize the nutrients that you've digested. I think if you can stop eating around when the sun sets, you'll position yourself to improve your metabolic health. And I would go so far to say that regardless of what it is you're eating, because a lot of folks cannot afford to, eat high quality food. That's just a reality. And a lot of those folks do suffer from higher rates of cardiometabolic dysfunction. But if we can just consolidate our eating window to 8 to 10 hours, we get ourselves like 60% of the way to our kind of metabolic goals. Again, it's not to say that content and quality does not matter. It absolutely does. But if we can't focus on that for whatever it might be, consolidating our eating window, so eating every single one of our calories between, an 8 to 12 hour window, we will improve our health. So digestion is a parasympathetic activity. What that means, so your autonomic nervous system has two branches, your parasympathetic and your sympathetic. Your parasympathetic is your rest and digest, right? We also want to be in a parasympathetic state when we're sleeping. So when we are digesting food, we're basically kind of confusing our system in terms of where it should apply its resources, right? So it basically diverts resources away from the sleep and the restoration. And that's where, if you have a big meal, you'll notice your heart rate is a lot higher, right? And your stress score is higher. When you are not having to digest, you'll see your stress score is lower. You'll see your heart rate is lower. Your heart rate variability would be higher in those situations. We want to make sure that when we're sleeping, we are not diverting any resources away from sleep. I mean, alcohol is another one, right? Like just to metabolize alcohol, you're diverting significant resources away from the regeneration and the recovery that needs to happen during sleep by bouncing you out of deeper stages of sleep. So the same sort of effect happens with food. It's just very apparent that meal timing and alcohol are really the two biggest disruptors to a good night's sleep. If you're waking up, prior to when the sun gets up, turn all the lights. You want to try to mimic day as much as possible. And then once the sun does come up, it's good to get outside. We want to try to restrict light basically after the sun goes down. We want to dim our home environment to the degree that we can. We want to try to minimize all artificial light in the lead up to bed. So we want to protect our melatonin release. And the only way we can release melatonin is by darkness. We need to be exposed to darkness in order for that master clock in our brain to know that it's time to go to sleep. And again, be able to tell our body, our tissues and organs and cells in our body what it needs to do at that moment. I mean, it's hard. Even the little dot on your, from your alarm clock or your TV is going to emit enough light. We're so sensitive to light, artificial light. So natural light, like the moon, totally fine. But any other type of light is really going to impair our ability to get into these deeper stages of sleep where all the restoration and regeneration happens. You need your room to be cold. You need to be dark. You need to be quiet. So there's the environmental stuff. You need to, stop eating a few hours before bed, ideally. You need to have stable sleep-wake time, ideally. These are all things that are going to drive getting into these deeper stages of sleep. But the other thing that you probably do really well is you manage stress throughout the day. I think that's another, the things that we do during the day, whether or not we're living our values, right? Do our behaviors align with things that we care about? Are we thinking about the things that we want to be thinking about? Are we managing our relationships effectively? So all the things that can manifest as stress, negative stress, will invariably rear its head during our sleep. But if we're managing those things during the day proactively and relatively well, generally speaking, sleep should happen, pretty naturally.